Alright, fuckers, so since Halloween is here, I thought I might as well do a video listing hated horror movies that I actually find enjoyment out of. Originally I wanted to sort of do a list of some of my favorite horror movies, but I thought doing this list would be way more interesting. I love horror just as much as the next guy or gal, even though the genre itself sort of gets a bad rep these days with most movies I see getting low ratings on IMDb. But who gives a shit about IMDb anyways? No, seriously, who actually takes it seriously? It's probably one of the most worthless rating systems of all of the major review websites. People shit on critics, but at least the critics are paid to make somewhat of an educational review on a film, and then rate it. On IMDb, any random person can just say, oh, it's too scary or too boring, or not even watch it at all and just give it a 0 rating. You see that all the time with controversial films on IMDb that before they're even released, they'll have tons of 0s and 10s from people who obviously haven't seen the movie. The site does nothing about it, so I just ignore IMDb ratings altogether. But yeah, this video is specifically going to be me naming my top 10 hated horror movies that I actually enjoy. And it could be anything horror related, whether it's horror comedy, horror action, or anything else as long as it's horror related. Now, the movies I'm gonna name here, I can't necessarily say that all of them are too hated, cause some are just more hated than others, whether that hate comes from the critics or audiences alike. So yeah, and I don't give a shit. This is my opinion. Don't start flaming at me in the comment section just because I enjoy this specific movie. I've never been that type of guy who just follows a crowd of people and just accepts that as the be-all and end-all opinion of that movie. If you're that kind of person that can't seem to form your own opinion, then you shouldn't be allowed to have one. Because that makes you part of the problem for why a lot of these shitty movies nowadays are so overpraised. But this video is not about that, so let's begin. Oh, and before I start, this is not going to be in any particular order. I'm just going to be throwing out random movies, so let's get started. So the first movie we have here is The Cannibal Holocaust. There isn't anything on the planet that is even remotely close to Cannibal Holocaust. This movie will separate the boys from the men, and it's saying something too. To me, it's that we as humans are all savages. I don't believe the animal killings are as bad as most people think, cause if you were in the jungle and wanted to eat, you would probably kill that turtle the same way they did. And I do believe they ate the animals after. So if that bothers you, then eating a cheeseburger should probably do the same thing then, because they do have to kill a cow to make it. But back to the movie. This one goes all the way. Awesome gore, animal slaughter, a bleak statement on the human race. Was it the greatest movie ever made? Probably not, because I do prefer The Green Inferno over this, but it's still worth checking out. Next we get is Friday the 13th, the 2009 remake. This was actually a movie I saw in theaters with my ex-girlfriend back during my freshman year in college, and was actually a movie I was actually surprised of it getting negative reviews. Now, many remakes of horror classics never seem to be as good as the originals, and that is mostly due to a different style of new horror films relying on gore instead of suspense. But unlike many horror classics, Friday the 13th was never really that great to begin with. I do enjoy the sequels a lot more with Jason Lives and New Blood, but at the same time though, I've always viewed those movies as guilty pleasures. As, you know, they're fun to watch, but, you know, they're critically not good movies. You know, they're your typical 80s slasher horror flicks. But there were 3 things that kept me watching these movies, and that was horny naked teenage women, Jason Voorhees, especially with Kane Hodder playing the character in the later sequels, and the creative murders, all of which there are plenty in this flick. Many critics have criticized this movie for being cynical, and because most of the teenagers are so scummy. However, I personally thought that made the film much better, because it made the kills much more glorious. But in all honesty, what horror fan has ever watched a Friday the 13th film and has said, oh, please don't let Jason kill that character, without the words of, before she gets naked, at the end of the sentence? Not very many, I would imagine. But yeah. Next movie we have here is Bride of Chucky. Now, this movie, I can't really say it's that hated because this movie sort of has gotten, like, mixed reviews. Similar to Batman Forever, where, you know, some people either like it or hate it. And some people thought it was like, oh man, this is where the franchise went downhill, which I disagree with. The franchise went downhill after that piece of shit seed of Chucky, because Don Mancini sucks. He literally got lucky with the first Child's Play movie because he had better people to work with, like Tom Holland. But after Bride of Chucky, which in my opinion was the last good Chucky movie, all his movies have sucked. And it's no wonder why they had to completely reboot the franchise. But enough with that. So, yeah. But yeah, this movie, it's gotten a lot of mixed reviews, mainly because it went the more comedic route with the franchise. But for me, I didn't mind it and actually enjoyed this. Maybe because there is a little bit of nostalgia for me to be watching this, because I actually saw this in theaters back in '98 and remembered enjoying this. Plus, this movie was also responsible for getting me into Rob Zombie. But anyways, Bride of Chucky marks the dramatic departure for the series, abandoning most elements of horror and instead of embracing a darkly satirical take. Don Mancini and his team were aware enough of the demystifying effect that long horror franchises have on their characters, and instead of allowing Chucky to slip into the self-parody category, decided to consciously go headfirst into the territory of bizarre comedy. A lot of the movie doesn't make much sense, but it's hilarious, and that's why I enjoy this. Jennifer Tilly joins Brad Dourif for the female counterpart of Chucky, a doll just as menacing and lovable as the original, in an on-the-road comedy quite like anything we've seen before. It's formulaic, sure, it doesn't really have a rhythm or reason, it's not supposed to be. It's just a fantastic comedy with some slasher elements inserted. So yeah, I'd definitely recommend watching this if you haven't seen it before. The next movie we have here is End of Days. I didn't see this movie in '99 because of bad reviews. However, a few years later I noticed in the TV guide listings that End of Days was going to be on the Sci-Fi Channel, so I decided to sit down and watch the entire movie. And I enjoyed it. So the story is about Jericho Kane, a beaten down ex-cop, wakes up another day oblivious to the struggle that he soon must face. His job as a security specialist along with his partner Chicago has become a tireless routine of speedy surveillance jobs. And since the death of his wife and child, everything in life which once held any meaning to him is now gone, following a confrontation with a crazed homeless man warning him of impleading a doom. Kane reduces a young woman, Christine York, from attackers who have invaded her home. He soon finds himself drawn into a heart-stomping game of cat and mouse, and he realizes that she is the key to a supernatural force of terror, born of a prophecy long ago foretold. So she is the witty object of desire of what deceptively appears to be a man, but is in fact the ultimate embodiment of evil Satan. Now, as the world stands on the brink of the new millennium, it is up to Kane to protect the Christine and the mankind from witnessing the end of days. End of Days is a pretty good mix of horror, action, and supernatural elements. This was a great movie, and a very underrated film by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Okay, next we have is the Amityville Horror 2005 remake. So obviously this movie is a remake of the 1979 horror film of the same name. Both the films are based on the novel of the Amityville Horror by Jay Anson, which is based on a true story. This movie is smarter than the other haunted house movies. In the movie, a family moves into a haunted house and they begin to realize that it is haunted by evil spirits. The daughter begins to talk to a girl that died there. A babysitter gets locked into a closet and tormented by a ghost. The dad becomes very abusive. And several other scary events happen in the movie. And after all these things happen, the mom Kathy goes to see a priest and asks him to see if he can bless the house to remove all the evil spirits that may be there. Things soon become worse as Kathy finds out her husband is possessed by an evil spirit and is trying to kill his family. I really liked that the mom in this film is not stupid. She actually tries to save her kids and her husband from the evil spirit. And it's funny too because Hollywood nowadays loves to pretend that we've never had any strong female characters, which is so not true. There have been like so many strong female characters over the years before your agenda-driven feminist movies, so I don't want to hear it. But yeah, back to the movie itself. The kids play their characters very well. Ryan Reynolds and Melissa George, who play the parents, give a pretty good performance as well. Like even the hot babysitter, she was pretty good as well, acting-wise. It's a good movie. I wouldn't say it's better than the original, but it's still worth watching. Yeah. So moving on. Next we have is Resident Evil Vendetta. Not quite as good as Damnation, but I really enjoyed it. The animation looks amazing and at times looks like something taken out of real life. It gets a bit goofy at times, but Resident Evil has always had those moments, so I'm okay with that. It's way better than those crappy live-action movies with Mila Jovovich, since it follows the game series more closely and isn't canon. Also, the characters are much more closer to the games. What makes CGI a little odd is the animation. Something just isn't right all the time. But this CGI is the best of the bunch so far. But yeah, I thought they did a pretty excellent job on Rebecca. Her face animation is more believable and skin tone is more believable. Chris and Leon animations were good too. The storyline is good, but not too unique for the series. Once again, they use a blonde guy as the CEO-style bad guy like in Degeneration. The locations were okay, nothing new or special. Style-wise, there is gunfu for sure. Also, Chris and Leon's fighting skills are ridicules. They seem to be overpowerful at times, kind of like playing mercenary mode. There are a few things that make you go, what the... But hey, that with any of the movies or games these days, just don't try to overthink it. Fight scenes are well animated and directed. Regardless if you like the style or not, it's very close to the live action movies. So yeah, overall it's pretty good. Not better than Damnation, but better than Degeneration. Next we have is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003 remake. Not the most hated movie on this list, but still one that deserves to be more appreciated. This film goes back to the dark, realistic roots of the franchise, and delivers a refreshing take worthy of bearing the title of the original 1974 horror classic. I definitely enjoyed this movie all the way through. The acting was phenomenal and proves how you can have a main cast of young, good-looking, fresh-faced actors without sacrificing talent, charisma, and effectiveness. The story, while different from the original, is very well written and orchestrated, keeping you interested on the edge of your seat from beginning to end. I have to say too that the acting was very good, though I wonder how hard it is to fake fear when you see some scenarios the actors were in. But even the background actors, especially the actor portraying Leatherface and the wonderful R.E. Emery as the sheriff, are very good and add the element of paranoid fear to the film. And the thing that I loved the most was how brutal and graphic the film was. The gore was very realistic and used well. Like, instead of buckets of blood, we get moments of horror that end in a very splash red. And like the first, the most brutal killings are shot in a way so that you see what's happening to a victim but yet don't see the victim at the same time. It's a great remake, just raw, gritty, but very well done. Leatherface does not disappoint, the kills were awesome, the acting was pretty good, and yeah, I recommend it. So the next movie we have here is the Silent Hill movie from 2006. People hate this movie, and I don't understand why. I played the first two games religiously. I've unlocked all of the different endings and played every scenario with the lights on. Those Silent Hill games injected fresh blood into the horror genre. The cornerstone for horror games was Resident Evil at the time, and with Silent Hill, I bought it on a whole different kind of terrifying. Quiet, misty town, and suddenly a klaxon starts blaring, and the idealistic world morphs into a living nightmare. Like mannequins come to life and start beating the crap out of you. Little creepy babies crawl around and try to kill you. The only way to tell something was close by the intended to kill you was a radio tied on a string around your neck. White static noise grows louder and stronger as danger lurks by. Your objective, well, it's to find your daughter and get the HE double hockey sticks out of Silent Hill alive. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Depends on the scenario you want or need. The movie is like a hybrid between the first game and the second game. All of the factors that brought the games and made them terrifying were used in this movie. Select characters from the games that were included. Even Pyramid Head makes an appearance with his giant machete sword. This movie is kin to the Silent Hill universe. Bear in mind, I'm not talking about the Abomination they released as a sequel to this movie. That movie was truly terrible in every sense of the word that was affront to the Silent Hill creators. So why do people play the game but hate this movie? I get why people who didn't play the game may not understand why this tiny town is home to some seriously messed up occultist and a ripped dude with an obtuse triangle on his head and sexy demented nurses trying to cut a witch. Confusing, sure. Annoying? Probably because there's no real explanation of as to why a place like Silent Hill exists on an ethereal plane such as that. Silent Hill, the coal mining town, sure. They did a sort of phone in the explanation they give. Blaming it on demons is some serious Bush League writing right there. Like, it's pretty much easy to pin pretty much everything on demons. Like the end of the world, demons, zombies, demons, Donald Trump. Definitely demons, but jokes aside, this is still a great movie. It played very well into the Silent Hill universe that terrorized me when I was a kid. It's well worth a watch knowing it was based on a video game. It helps alleviate what may be perceived as ridiculous or confusing. So the next movie we have here is Blair Witch 2: Book of Shadows. And this is actually one movie I own on DVD. And yes, I do enjoy the second movie, and it's mainly because I wasn't a huge fan of the original. Because I remember, like, way back in 1999, people were making this out to be like the scariest movie ever. And I remember my friends and I, who were so notorious for sneaking into movie theaters, went to see this. And I remember being so bored out of my freaking mind seeing it. I've tried to see what the big deal was, and I've tried to rewatch it multiple times, and I still don't get it. It was slow, absolutely not scary until the last minutes, and I guess even that didn't do much for me. I mean, like, only the ending is quite worthy, but besides that, this movie was nothing for me. Like, I'm just not into found footage movies. Like, how is shaking a camera 99% of the time a good movie? But the sequel, however, I actually enjoy and even prefer this over the original. Yeah, sue me, I don't care. Like, honestly, does this really deserve a 3.9 out of 10 on IMDb? I mean, I know I said I wouldn't mention IMDb and I wouldn't take him seriously, but come on. You're putting this close to Batman and Robin level? Like, seriously? Like, I don't understand why a lot of people hate it. It's a good sequel. People say it didn't connect with the first one, which I think it does more. Okay, so it's not like the first one with the found footage type format, but it didn't need to be, which is good. Even the real celebrity reviews of the movie was nicely done. The way they go around Burkittsville interviewing townsfolk who are still a little miffled by all of the unwanted PUD and fascination with their quaint little town is a little humorous. Or the ones who are glad for all the attention, especially the ones who have figured out ways to cash in on it by selling sticks and rocks in the shape of the Constantine cross that was the infamous calling card in The Witch in the first movie. Was the movie scary? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty creepy how all these poor souls just keep finding out horrible things they have no memory whatsoever of it. This, of course, leads into slow descent into madness, paranoia, accusations as things become more unraveled at the seams. But it seems well that the characters do a good job acting. It's not the best movie ever made, but sure as hell not the worst as the people make it out to be. Like, I mean, geez people, take a chill pill. So yeah, it's a lot different than the first one, but it was better. We get a better backstory on the Blair Witch. And also, just like the first movie, you don't see the witch. The characters in the movie were pretty solid, and the acting was not bad at all. It was pretty good for the most part, but what was the ultimate sin this movie made? Like, I'm trying to figure that out, man. But yeah, I enjoyed the movie, especially the ending, and it did not deserve bad reviews. Plus, it had a pretty good soundtrack. So for those interested, I would ignore the negative reviews and just watch it for yourself. And the final movie we have here is the Rob Zombie Halloween remake. Yep, this is another horror remake that's hated and I love and I don't care. Like, I actually thought Rob Zombie did a pretty good job reimagining a horror classic. Like, I used to heavily be into Rob Zombie's music back in the late 90s and early 2000s, but his movies usually didn't do it for me. But I thought this was well done. And I don't know, there's just something about going into what made Michael Myers a serial killer that made it interesting for me. Plus, it's a lot more bloodier than the original. The haters of the remake don't accept what Zombie was doing, putting a new spin on the 1978 John Carpenter classic. Zombie said that he didn't want to just do the same movie because it was already done. The soundtrack was awesome for the remake. I liked that we got more of a Michael Myers backstory. People hate it, but I thought it was great. I thought Michael McDowell did a pretty good job as Dry Samuel Loomis, but he can never replace Donald Pleasence. He will always be Loomis in my eyes. But I do admit, Zombie did fuck up the Loomis character in the sequel. It was a pretty wrong approach of the character to just become a major dick. Remember, a remake shouldn't be outshined by the original. It's just another retelling of the story. It was great seeing one of my favorite Scream Queens in Danielle Harris back in the Halloween movie, but it was strange seeing her playing the role of Annie because Harris was in her 30s, and she was playing an 18-year-old, but she pulled it off very well, because Harris is very young looking. And I thought Taylor Campton did a pretty good job playing Laurie Strode. She was believable and I felt sorry for her. But it sucks that Campton hasn't went on to do bigger things because I thought she was a pretty good actress in my opinion. Plus, she can do a great scream. However, her character in the sequel is a complete bitch. But yeah, the movie was great. And that's pretty much it for this list. So, if you have any horror movies that you like that people hate, then let me know down below. But anyways, fuckers, that was my video. Later.